There are parts of the wilderness where the silence feels organized, where the forest isn't just quiet, but attentive. I found one of those places on a trail I'd patrolled for 13 years. On September 14th, 2018, I was assigned to patrol a section of forest no one ever volunteered for. My name is Daniel Carpenter. I've been a ranger in the Cascade Mountains for 13 years. I know these trails better than I know the roads in my own town. I can tell you which ridge gets afternoon sun in October, where the elk calve in spring, which campsite floods first when it rains. But on that September morning, 2 miles past Coldwater Creek, I found something in my forest that I couldn't explain. The silence hit me first. Not the peaceful quiet you get in deep wilderness. This was different, oppressive. Like something had pressed mute on the entire mountain. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the canopy overhead. Just my own breathing and the sound of my boots on the trail. Then I smelled it, something musky and wrong. Not bear, not cougar, something that made my hindbrain scream predator. Every instinct I'd developed over 13 years in these mountains started screaming at me to turn around. I didn't listen. When I came over the ridge, I stopped walking. 7 Douglas fir trees were lying across the deer trail, each one at least 40 feet tall, thick enough that 2 men couldn't link hands around the trunk. They'd been knocked down recently, the exposed wood still pale and fresh. That's when my brain started trying to make it make sense. Storm damage, maybe, except we hadn't had storms. Some kind of landslide event. But the terrain was stable here. I moved closer, and that's when I saw how they'd fallen. Not cut, not uprooted, snapped. Each trunk showed splintered wood at chest height, broken from massive lateral force. Something had hit these trees hard enough to snap them, then they'd fallen in a rough cluster across the trail. My hand went to my radio, but I didn't key it yet. I was staring at the tree line, and something about the shadows between the trunks didn't look right. Shapes that seemed too vertical, too still. That's when I saw the first print. Pressed into the soft earth beside the nearest tree, clear as day. 5 toes, each tipped with a claw mark that had punched down 2 inches into packed dirt. The print was 14 inches long, 7 inches wide at the pad. I've tracked black bears my entire career, and I know what their prints look like in every season, every type of soil. This wasn't a bear print. The spacing was wrong. The depth distribution was wrong. I pulled out my phone and took a picture, my hands not quite steady. Then I knelt down and put my own boot next to it for scale. The print dwarfed my size 11 hiking boot. I stood up slowly, scanning the tree line. The shadows between the trunks looked deeper now, more substantial. I keyed my radio, kept my voice level. "Base, this is Carpenter. I'm at the North Ridge Trail, about 2 miles past Coldwater Creek. I need someone up here, now." The response crackled back. "What's the situation, Daniel?" I looked at the fallen trees, at the prints in the soil, at the shadows that seemed to be watching me. "I don't know yet," I said. But you're going to want to see this." I didn't mention that the hair on the back of my neck was standing up, or that every nerve in my body was telling me I was being observed, or that when I finally turned to head back down the trail, I could have sworn I heard something moving parallel to me through the dense timber, always staying just out of sight. Something big. Within 2 hours, I had company. 2 rangers I'd worked with for years, Mike Chen and Sarah Rodriguez, and a state wildlife biologist named Dr. Elise Chen. No relation to Mike, but I watched them work in similar silence as they processed the scene. Dr. Chen was methodical. She photographed each tree from multiple angles, measured the height of the breaks, examined the force vectors. She spent 20 minutes just circling the prints, studying them from different positions, not touching anything yet. I'd worked with Chen before on a mountain lion incident 2 years back. She had a reputation for being unshakable, the kind of scientist who could examine evidence without flinching, catalog findings like she was reading a grocery list. But I watched her face as she studied those prints, and I saw something I'd never seen before: uncertainty. Finally, she pulled out her casting kit. "Daniel, I need you to help me make plaster impressions. Mike, Sarah, establish a perimeter and document everything within 50 feet of this area. I want photographs of any disturbed soil, broken branches, anything unusual. We worked in near silence. The forest stayed quiet the entire time. I kept glancing at the tree line, that feeling of being watched getting stronger with every minute. When we'd finished the cast and packed up the equipment, Mike and Sarah headed back down the trail. Dr. Chen pulled me aside, waited until they were out of earshot. "What do you think we're looking at?" I asked. She glanced back at the broken trees. "Officially, I'm going to have to report this as possible territorial behavior by an unusually large predator, complicated by environmental factors. But I don't know." She looked at me directly. "Black bears don't break trees at that height, and they definitely don't leave prints like those. Then what did?" She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "The prints show a bipedal gait, stride length of approximately 8 feet. Whatever made them was walking upright when it broke those trees. The angle of the force, the height of the snap points, all of it indicates something standing on 2 legs. Something with enough strength to snap mature Douglas fir. That's not possible. I know. That's why I'm going to file it carefully and keep investigating." She started walking back toward the trail. "But Daniel, stay alert up here. Whatever made those marks is big, strong, and potentially aggressive. I want you to carry deterrence when you're out here." I fell into step beside her. "You think it's dangerous?" "I think anything that can do that to a tree is dangerous, and we don't know what its hunting patterns are." She didn't answer any more questions. Just looked back at the ridge one more time before heading to her truck. I stayed there for another 10 minutes after she left, standing at the trailhead, looking up at the tree line. The shadows between the trunks seemed darker now, more defined, and just before I turned to leave, I saw one of them move. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those trees in my mind, the precision of the damage, the sheer strength required. I kept thinking about Dr. Chen's words, bipedal, 8-foot stride. What walks on 2 legs in these mountains and stands 8 feet tall? At 2 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee. Sat at my kitchen table reviewing the photos on my phone. The prints, the broken trees, that last shot I'd taken of the tree line before leaving. I zoomed in on the shadows between the trunks. There, something vertical. Too tall to be a bear, too broad to be a person. Just visible enough to register as there, but too obscured by shadow and distance to make out details. I stared at that photo for 20 minutes, my coffee going cold. Something had been there while I documented the scene, watching from the darkness. My phone rang at 6:47 a.m., jolting me awake at the kitchen table where I'd eventually dozed off. County Dispatch. There'd been an incident at the Holloway Ranch, 15 miles south of my grid section. The dispatcher's voice was tight. Sheriff's deputy requested a ranger on site. Something about livestock. What kind of something? She didn't say. Just said you'd want to see it yourself. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to the Holloway Ranch and knew immediately this wasn't a routine livestock call. Deputy Maria Santos was standing in the pasture, staring at the ground. Tom Holloway stood nearby with a rifle across his chest, his face the color of old paper. I counted 6 dead sheep from the driveway. When I got closer, I saw the fence. 20 feet of chain link peeled back like aluminum foil, the metal torn outward in twisted strips. The support posts had been ripped clean out of their concrete foundations. "Jesus," I said quietly. Santos turned to look at me. We'd worked together on a missing hiker case the previous summer. Solid cop, not prone to exaggeration. "Happened around 2 a.m., she said. "Tom heard the commotion, came running with his rifle." I looked at Holloway. "Did you see what did this?" His jaw worked for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat. "Saw something moving past the barn, heading for the trees. Thought it was a person at first, too tall to be anything else. But the way it moved." "How did it move?" "Fast. Covered maybe 100 yards in just seconds." He pointed toward the tree line. "Ran on 2 legs. Like a man, but wrong. Too big. Too fast." Santos gestured for me to follow her to the fence. "Carpenter, look at this." The fence had been gripped and pulled. I could see the impression marks where something had wrapped around the metal and torn it outward with enough force to snap it. Then I saw the print. Same configuration as the ones from the ridge. Same size. Fresh enough that the edges were still sharp. "You've seen prints like this before," Santos said. It wasn't a question. I nodded slowly. 2 days ago, North Ridge Trail. Different location. Same. Whatever this is. So it's moving. Hunting. Yeah. I pulled out my phone and photographed the print, the fence, to the dead sheep. And it just traveled 15 miles in 3 days. By 9 a.m., the property was full of officials, county sheriff, state wildlife officer, and Dr. Chen, who'd driven down from the ranger station the moment she got the call. I watched her examine the scene, saw her face go carefully neutral when she found the prints. She worked silently for an hour, cataloging everything, taking measurements, collecting samples. Finally, she pulled Santos and me aside, far enough from the others that we wouldn't be overheard. "Same prints as the ridge," she said quietly. "Same evidence of bipedal movement, same strength indicators. But this shows active predation. It's hunting." Santos crossed her arms. Those sheep weren't eaten, just killed. The kills were efficient. Throats crushed, spines broken. It tore through reinforced fencing. He killed 6 animals in under 2 minutes based on the timeline, and fled when confronted. Chen looked back at the fence. "This is a large, aggressive predator with unusual capabilities." "So what do we tell people?" Santos asked. "We issue a wildlife advisory, recommend improved fencing and livestock protection measures, and I'm requesting permission to set up camera traps." She met my eyes. "Because whatever this is, it's territorial, it's powerful, and we need to know what we're dealing with before someone gets hurt." The cameras went up over the next 4 days. Dr. Chen and I placed 12 high-resolution trail cameras in a grid pattern covering the area between the ridgeline and the Holloway Ranch. Motion-activated, infrared-capable, designed to capture anything larger than a raccoon moving through the coverage zone. And we worked mostly in silence. I'd catch her glancing at the tree line the same way I did, that constant awareness of being in predator territory. On the 3rd day, while we were mounting camera 7 in a clearing of old-growth timber, she spoke without looking at me. "You feel it too, don't you?" "Feel what?" "Like we're being hunted." I secured the camera strap and stepped back. "Yeah, since the first day at the ridge. I've worked in wilderness my entire career," she said quietly. 23 years. I know what it feels like to be in predator territory. Mountain lion country, bear habitat, all of it. This is different. How? Most predators avoid humans. They know we're dangerous, unpredictable. They watch from a distance and leave when we get too close. She looked out at the forest. "This thing isn't avoiding us. It's tracking us. And it's not afraid." A chill ran down my spine. "You think it's watching us right now?" "I think it's been tracking our movements this entire time, learning our patterns." We finished mounting the cameras and hiked back in silence. But I couldn't shake the feeling that every step we took was being observed by something in the shadows. Something that was deciding whether we were worth hunting. For a week, the cameras recorded normal forest activity. Deer moving through at dawn, elk bedding down in the clearings, a black bear that wandered past camera 4 on September 23rd, walking on all fours, doing typical bear things. I started to wonder if maybe it had moved on. Maybe whatever it was had left the area, following game or establishing new territory. Then Dr. Chen called me at 11 p.m. on September 29th. "Daniel," he had come to my office now. The urgency in her voice killed any questions. I drove through mountain darkness, my headlights cutting tunnels through the fog, my mind racing through possibilities. When I arrived, she was sitting at her desk with her laptop open, staring at the screen. "I've watched this a dozen times," she said without looking up. "I need you to tell me what you see." She turned the laptop toward me and hit play. The infrared footage showed a clearing I recognized from camera 7. Timestamp, September 28th, 2:47 a.m. For 3 seconds, nothing but ambient vegetation glow. Then something entered from the left side of frame. Tall, 7.5, maybe 8 feet, based on the height markers we'd placed. Moving on two legs, body angled slightly forward. The arms hung low, long, proportions all wrong for a human. The head was elongated, canine, ears prominent and upright. The fur, because there was definitely fur, caught the infrared light in a way that showed muscular movement underneath. It crossed the clearing in 4 strides, movements fluid and purposeful, then stopped, facing the camera. For 8 seconds, it stood perfectly still. Then it tilted its head, the way a predator does when it detects something in its environment. It stared directly at the camera lens. Then it dropped to all 4s and moved out of frame so fast it blurred. I realized I'd stopped breathing. "Play it again." She did. I watched it 3 more times. Watched the way the eyes caught the infrared and reflected it back like mirrors. Eyes shine but intense. Predatory. "What am I looking at?" I asked, even though something in my gut already knew the answer. I don't know." Chen's voice was hollow. "But look at the proportions. The arm length, the leg joints, the canid skull structure. That's not a bear. That's not anything I've ever documented. Could it be someone in a costume? Some kind of hoax?" She zoomed in on the freeze frame. "Look at how it moves, the way it drops from bipedal to quadrupedal, the muscle definition under the fur, the joint articulation." She shook her head. "That's not a costume. This thing is real." I stared at the screen, at those reflecting eyes, at the powerful build and predatory focus. "We need to report this." "I'm filing a report with state wildlife," she said, "but this footage is going to raise more questions than answers. They'll want to classify it, and I don't know what category it fits into. So what do? We keep monitoring. We document everything, and we hope it moves on before we have a serious incident." But I could hear it in her voice. She didn't believe that any more than I did. I drove home in the dark, and for the first time in 13 years, the mountain roads didn't feel safe. On October 4th, a hiker named Stephen Ortiz didn't come home. His girlfriend called it in at 7:30 p.m. when he failed to meet her at the Lost Lake trailhead. Search and rescue mobilized immediately. I joined the team as Forest Service liaison, that familiar knot of dread already forming in my stomach. We found his truck at the trailhead, permit properly filed, planned route clearly marked on the map in his glove compartment. Everything by the book. The search began at first light. I was running on coffee and 3 hours of sleep, scanning the trail, the tree line, and listening to the forest in ways I never had to before. We found his day pack at 8:15 a.m., 2 miles up the trail, lying in the center of the path. Contents scattered: water bottle, energy bars, first aid kit. His phone was still inside, battery dead. No signs of struggle at that location. Just the pack, abandoned like he'd dropped it and run. "Daniel." I looked up. Mike Chen was standing 30 feet off the trail, his face pale. I walked over and felt my stomach drop. Pressed into the soft earth near a Douglas fir was a print I'd seen twice before. 14 inches, 5 toes, fresh, and leading away from it, drag marks through the undergrowth. I stood there staring, and something cold settled in my chest. Stephen Ortiz had encountered it on the trail, and whatever it was had taken him. We searched for 3 days, expanding grid patterns, helicopter support, tracking dogs that kept circling back to that same area where the drag marks disappeared into dense timber, whining and refusing to move forward. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that creature from the camera footage, saw those reflecting eyes. On October 7th, we found him. I was with the team that reached the site first, a quarter-mile off the main trail in a section of old growth so dense the canopy blocked most of the sunlight. Stephen Ortiz was lying at the base of a tree. He'd been dead for at least 2 days. The medical examiner would later say massive trauma to the chest and neck. Severe lacerations consistent with large claws. Damage consistent with a powerful predator. His pack and jacket were torn. One boot was missing entirely. And on the tree trunk directly above where he lay, starting about 7 feet up and dragging downward, were 5 parallel claw marks. Deep gouges in the bark, evenly spaced. I stood there staring at those marks while the rest of the team radioed for the medical examiner, and I felt my world tilt. Whatever had killed Stephen Ortiz had stood on two legs to make those marks. Deputy Sanos arrived as we were preparing to secure the scene. I watched her take in everything. The body, the torn clothing, the marks on the tree. She pulled me aside away from the others. "This wasn't a bear," she said quietly. "No. We need to close these trails immediately." "We will, but first we need to figure out what we're dealing with." Dr. Chen called an emergency meeting 3 days later. Forest Service Regional Director, County Sheriff, state wildlife officials. She presented everything: the broken trees, the livestock kills, the camera footage, Stephen Ortiz's death. She showed them the prints, the measurements, the behavioral analysis. I watched from the back of the room as she made her case. Methodical, scientific, undeniable. Her conclusion was direct. We have an unidentified large predator exhibiting bipedal locomotion and aggressive territorial behavior. The attack on Mr. Ortiz was fatal. I'm recommending immediate trail closures and a coordinated wildlife response until we can identify and track this animal. The silence that followed was heavy. Then the regional director cleared his throat. "Dr. Chen, we appreciate your thorough documentation. However, we need proper species identification before we can implement major trail closures." "In the economic impact..." "A man is dead," Chen interrupted. The sheriff leaned forward. "With all due respect, doctor, the injuries are consistent with a large predator attack. Mountain lion or exceptionally large black bear. The camera footage is compelling, but inconclusive as to species. Until we have definitive identification, we'll issue a wildlife advisory and increase ranger patrols." "The attack pattern doesn't match any known species in this region," I said from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at me. "I've been working search and rescue for 8 years. I've seen what bear attacks look like, what mountain lion kills look like. This is different." I stepped forward. "The prints, the bipedal locomotion, here the strength required to break those trees. We need to treat this as a serious threat." The state wildlife coordinator nodded slowly. "We'll increase monitoring, additional cameras, ranger patrols, and a formal wildlife advisory. Dr. Chen, continue your documentation. If we can get clearer evidence of species classification, we'll reassess." The regional director stood up. "Trail advisory goes into effect immediately. Hikers are to travel in groups, carry deterrent spray, and report any unusual wildlife sightings. Meeting adjourned." I found Chen in the parking lot afterward, loading equipment into her truck. "They're not closing the trails," she said flatly. "No, but they're taking it seriously now." "Not seriously enough." She slammed the tailgate. "That thing killed Stephen. It's still out there. And until we can identify what it is and where it's denning, hikers are at risk." She pulled a USB drive from her pocket and handed it to me. "Everything I've documented is on here. Every photo, every measurement, every piece of footage. If something happens to me, make sure someone continues the research. Nothing's going to happen to you." She looked toward the mountains. "Whatever that thing is, it's apex, it's territorial, and we've been walking through its hunting grounds for weeks." She opened her truck door. "I hope you're right, but I'm not taking chances anymore." She drove away and I stood there watching her taillights disappear, a cold weight settling in my chest. October 23rd started as a normal evening shift. I was in my office doing paperwork when the call came in, and the Jensen family had reported their 10-year-old daughter missing. Emma Jensen had been playing in the backyard of their property, which bordered national forest land. Her mother had checked on her at 4:15 p.m. By 4:45, she was gone. I felt my blood turn to ice. Every searcher who mobilized that night thought we were looking for a lost child who'd wandered into the woods. But I knew better. I knew what was out there, what hunted in those mountains. I joined the search at 5:30 p.m., carrying equipment I'd never needed before. High-powered spotlight, thermal imaging camera, bear spray, and a sidearm I'd checked out from the ranger station. We combed through 200 acres, called her name until our voices went hoarse. The tracking dogs seemed confused, circling areas but refusing to commit to a trail, the way they did when a stronger predator scent confused them. At 11:30 p.m., One of the dogs alerted near a creek bed half a mile from the Jensen property. We found Emma's shoes, both of them, lying near a flat rock in the creek. One had blood on it. I stood in that creek bed, my flashlight playing over smooth river stones, and saw the prints. 2 sets this time. One large, the same configuration I'd been tracking for 6 weeks. One smaller, maybe 2/3 the size. Both bipedal, both showing the same 5-toed clawed pattern. There's more than one, Deputy Sano said beside me, her voice hollow. I was already moving, following the tracks upstream, my heart hammering, my hand on my sidearm. Daniel, wait for backup. But I couldn't wait, because if there were 2 of them, and they had taken a child, every second mattered. The tracks led through dense timber, always staying close to the creek. I followed them for 3/4 of a mile, my spotlight cutting through darkness, my breath coming fast. Then I heard something ahead, a whimpering sound. I broke into a run. The clearing opened up suddenly, and there was Emma Jensen, huddled against a fallen log, crying. I swept my light across the clearing, looking for movement in the shadows, looking for the creatures that had taken her. Nothing. Emma? I kept my voice soft, my light on her. It's Ranger Carpenter. Are you hurt? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears and dirt. It chased me. It was so fast. The rest of the search team caught up to me, and suddenly there were lights everywhere. Voices, and Emma's mother sobbing and running to grab her daughter. The paramedics checked Emma while I stood at the edge of the clearing with Santos, our flashlights illuminating the ground. The prints were everywhere, large and small, circling the area where Emma had been hiding, approaching from multiple directions, a hunting pattern, but they all led away back into the deep timber, like something had spooked them. Maybe our lights, our voices, the size of the search party. On a nearby tree at about shoulder height for the larger creature were fresh claw marks, 4 parallel gouges that had torn through bark into the wood beneath. Santos photographed everything in silence. When she spoke, her voice was shaking. She's lucky. If we'd been 10 minutes later... I know. They were hunting her, Daniel. Actively hunting a child. I thought about the camera footage, about the powerful build and predatory intelligence in those eyes, about Stephen Ortiz lying dead in the forest. We need those trails closed, now, before someone else dies. We took Emma to the hospital. She was treated for shock, minor cuts and bruises, dehydration. The official statement said she'd gotten lost in the woods, experienced a panic reaction, was found safe by the search team. But I knew what had really happened. She'd been prey, and only our quick response had saved her. The next morning, the Forest Service announced temporary trail closures in the affected area. Dr. Chen called me that afternoon. Did you hear? Yeah, about time. They're sending a wildlife response team, experienced trackers, monitoring equipment, where they're taking this seriously now. Her voice was tight with relief. Maybe we can finally get some answers. And if they find it, then we tranquilize it, document it, and relocate it to deep wilderness, far from populated areas. That's the protocol for aggressive predators. But her voice didn't sound convinced. Elise, this thing took down a full-grown man. It hunted a child. What if it can't be safely relocated? Long silence on the other end. Then they'll do what they have to do to protect public safety, she said finally. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. November and December passed with the trails closed. The wildlife response team set up an extensive monitoring system. Motion sensors, cameras, even bait stations designed to lure large predators. For weeks, nothing. No sightings, no kills, no prints. It was like whatever had been there simply vanished. Dr. Chen reviewed footage obsessively. It's gone, she told me in mid-December. Either it moved to a different territory or it's denned up for winter. Either way, the threat level has decreased significantly. You think it's safe to reopen the trails? For winter, probably. Foot traffic is low anyway. Spring is when we'll need to be vigilant again. See if it returns or if it's truly relocated. On December 12th, checking routine camera footage alone in my office, I found something that made my blood run cold. Camera 7, 3:33 a.m., the same creature from September. standing at the edge of the clearing, facing the camera. But this time it wasn't alone. Two smaller figures stood beside it, one on each side. The same proportions, the same upright stance. Pack animals. Or family units. They stood there for 23 seconds, completely still, watching the camera with those reflective eyes. Then all three turned and walked into the darkness, dropping to all fours and vanishing like smoke. I sat there at 2 a.m., staring at that frozen frame, and understood something that made my hands shake. They hadn't left. They just learned to avoid us. These things were still out there, still in the mountains, still hunting, and they knew exactly where we'd placed every camera. I added the footage to the file and locked it in my desk drawer. Then I made a phone call to Dr. Chen. "We can't reopen those trails," I said. "I just saw the footage," she replied, her voice tight. "I'm calling an emergency meeting for tomorrow. Those trails stay closed indefinitely." It's been 2 years. When the trails in that section remain closed. Official reason? Ongoing wildlife monitoring and habitat protection. Stephen Ortiz's death is listed as a fatal wildlife encounter. Emma Jensen's case is a successful search and rescue operation. The Holloway Ranch incident is an unexplained livestock predation event. All filed, all documented, all true. Dr. Chen still works in the area, though she transferred to a different district. We compare notes every few months. The cameras stay up. The monitoring continues. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, we get footage. A shape moving through the darkness. Eyes reflecting in the infrared. Prints in the snow that shouldn't exist. Evidence of something that lives in those mountains. Something powerful, territorial, and cunning enough to avoid human contact when it chooses to. The local folklore has stories about creatures like this. Tales passed down through generations of hunters and rangers. Things seen at the edges of firelight. Shapes that walk like men but aren't. Some people call them dogmen. Others have different names. I don't know what they are. I don't know where they came from or how many there might be in the deep wilderness. I just know they're real. And I know that some boundaries exist for a reason. Natural lines were not meant to cross. The forest keeps its mysteries. And some mysteries are better left undisturbed. This story is a work of fiction inspired by cryptid folklore and wilderness legends. Any resemblance to actual events or persons is coincidental.